Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Go Natural Education podcast. I'm your host, Steve Melito. Today, we're talking to Dr. Ashok Vaseashta, the CEO and CRO of the International Clean Water Institute. Dr. Vaseashta is an international expert in clean water technologies and management, and he served as director of several NATO Advanced Study Institutes. Among his many accomplishments are the publication of 250 works, including about 10 books. Notable among them is the 2021 publication of Water Safety, Security, and Sustainability, Threat Detection and Mitigation. The book is published by Springer, and you can find it on Amazon. Dr. Vaseashta, welcome to the podcast.
My pleasure.
So tell me, why does climate change get so much more attention than water shortages?
That's a very good question, and I have wondered about that quite a bit. Well, the climate change started as global warming. Now it's become climate change. Uh, and water scarcity. These are the two existential risks. One gets more attention than the other. And as I mentioned, it's a valid question. I thought about it and I have addressed, perhaps because of political reason, and also the fact that the climate change affects the entire society. And that's the reason we tend to see it more often as compared to water issue, which addresses on individual basis. And more specifically, because of the fact it's sort of localized, it has not gotten so much of attention. However, people are now realizing from individual standpoint, especially in Southeast Asia, because of the water shortage, it is becoming more and more prevalent because of the fact that there's a strict water shortage as the communities are getting together in the sense that there are more mega cities and they have water shortage, they have rotation of water availability and so forth. So it's becoming more prominent, but simply because of the political issue, because talking about climate change, it is more politically convenient. That's the reason one gets more attention than the other. Uh, so that's the short response. I guess one can talk about it a whole lot longer, but nonetheless, the scarcity of water is becoming a major issue. And I think as a society, we need to address, we need to make sure that we educate people. And that's the reason I've written several books on this topic.
Very good. And what is the relationship between soil quality and water quality and vice versa?
Technically, they are the same. However, it depends on the source of water. If the source of water, let's say the soil quality is not so good and it's for agriculture, uh, then it may not be such a big issue because it's not noticed as much. People, those who have well water, like myself, the soil quality and the water quality and vice versa, they're related to each other. Um, as mentioned that I have well water, we are very sensitive to adding pesticides or any type of uh, chemicals we use for fertilizing our plants, etc. We are very, very sensitive to that. But if the source of water is far away, then people do not care as much. This is again one of the topics which I had discussed in several of my publications, more specifically in West Virginia. This topic is, I guess people address quite a bit because of the fact that there are associated health risks associated with the soil quality. So to address your question, they are actually related. but it depends where the source of water is located.
Of course. Globally, how are chemical fertilizers and pesticides affecting drinking water supplies?
As I mentioned, that the pesticides, herbicides, and all those chemicals which we use, and now, of course, it's the micro and nanoplastics that's also impacting the water quality quite a bit. If they get into the water table, as I gave you example of Kanawha River, for example, in West Virginia, all these chemicals, for multiple reasons. A, they are intentionally discharged. Some, they are unintentionally discharged and they get into the river that becomes essentially the source of water. In that case, definitely it impacts. But if the source of water is located far away, uh, then it may not be as much an issue, at least for the time being. But nonetheless, going forward, I foresee this as a major issue, but they are all related. Any chemical which we add into the water, into the soil, obviously gets absorbed, gets transported to the source of water, and eventually it returns back to us. Not all chemicals we are able to isolate from the water. Micro nanoplastics, close to about maybe less than a micron, we are not able to isolate. And as a result, we are seeing lots of children consuming nanoplastics in water. So um, this is one of the major issues because the chemical industry has advanced so rapidly, but at the same time, we do not have mitigation or remediation strategies for those chemicals from water. So there's a huge disconnect. And this is something which I've addressed in my books and publication to make sure that we understand and obviously try to consume as clean water as possible.
Sure. As a follow-up to that question, I'm not familiar with microplastics and nanoplastics. Are these intentionally discharged, accidentally discharged? Are they byproducts of consumer goods? Where are they coming from?
All the single-use plastic, uh, uh, I want to say, unfortunately, almost 80% of the single-use plastic returns back to the landfill, and then they find their way to the river and the sources of water. Over a period of time, they disintegrate from micro to nanoplastics. And because of the fact our filtration mechanism is not geared towards capturing plastic, they are types of chemical. These are called forever chemicals, and they stay in water for a long time. And because of the fact we use them in our toothpaste, in our cosmetics, so these little particles of plastics, they tend to stay in water. And uh, because of the fact we do not have remediation strategies to isolate them, they tend to stay in water uh, forever. And this is something which we need to work on to make sure that we remove plastics uh, from the sources of water. Or, and that's the reason there are now a lot more regulation on discarding plastics uh, because of its contamination in water.
Right. One last question, if I may. What are some sensor technologies for monitoring water quality? And can any of these technologies be used in agriculture?
Now, in terms of the water sensing technologies, coincidentally, we still use older technology. These are borehole types of sensors, which are used simply for detecting salinity, turbidity, those types of parameters. Nonetheless, now there are some sensors, although there are all types of sensors, they can detect all types of chemical and biological agents, but they are not integrated into daily use of chemicals which go into the water. Even at the water processing plants, they still have sensors which detect basic chemicals. But nonetheless, this new and emerging chemicals, including micro nanoplastics, for that, all those sensors exist, but at the same time, they are not integrated into a integrated platform which detects all types of uh, sensors and detectors. And it is for that reason I had introduced a concept called Universal Water Quality Index. We have Water Quality Index, which measures basic parameters, but nonetheless, because of these emerging chemicals, we need to have something called Universal Water Quality Index, which is applicable globally. Uh, and because of the fact all of us have pretty much similar body constitution, that means we need a good water quality. So that's the reason we need to implement this universal water quality index, which detects all types of chemical compositions and be able to tell us what is the water quality, if it's safe for drinking or not. As mentioned, this has been now introduced into the literature and slowly it's catching up. Uh, and I hope that we are able to implement that sometime in the near future.
I hope so too. Dr. Ashok Vaseashta, thank you so much for being on this episode of Go Natural Education.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me.